So a lot of you artists, poets at home are wondering how to get your work into more spaces. A lot of you are thinking open mics or maybe showcases and things like that. And today's show is all about not only getting your work into more spaces, but also being able to create an atmosphere around your work that not only fits in with the brand of your work, but also fits in with your brand as an artist. And I'm really, really excited for it. You know, it's the Versus every Tuesday evening. It's Jeff Anderson,
What's up, guys? I'm Jeff.
Jeff, and my name is Matthias, and this is the Versus podcast, man. Well, first, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm solid, man. Been solid. Anything new in the poetry world
In the
on your
poetry
end?
world, what is new? So one thing we did too. So in case you guys don't know, we have a poetry open mic every Friday. So something we're doing now is we're really interested again in like professional poetry development. We want people to take their work seriously and be able to present themselves in a way that's not like, yo, I read this poem in my bedroom with my ceiling fan twirling with weird shadows in my bed that's half made. No, we're trying to take our work really, really seriously here. So one of the things that we're starting to do is we're giving people professional recordings of their work, so that way they can actually, distribute their work in a way that speaks to the level of quality and professionalism they want to convey. So we have two camera setups. So we got high quality level microphones and things like that. So we're trying to make sure you can present your work in a way that is fitting for you. You straight or not
Sorry.
straight?
Keep going. Yeah, my for some
Oh
reason
no.
it disconnected.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. We'll
Okay.
get it back on.
While we're figuring that out, so that's probably a new thing for us. So we're trying to make sure that everyone is able to. Let me rephrase. I think that an aspect of poetry that poets often want is they want the writing to do all the work, which I understand, but I think we miss out on some of the other aspects. Writing obviously is the center of everything, but if you're really trying to take your work seriously, then we need to start handling aspects, for instance, of presentation. Craft isn't going to be the thing that saves you. Oh my gosh. Craft isn't going to be the thing that saves you. Instead, it's going to be the thing that is assumed. People assume that your writing is already of a certain quality, so if you're trying to make your work stand out, this is where elements of presentation become super, super key. And so that's what we're trying to do with the open mic.
For sure. You know, I think there's something that's really good about that is that it's something that even if you're using it right now, like if you're saying like I'm a working artist and I really want to get more of my work presented in video form to more places, like it's gonna something that's gonna help you right now, but it's also content for later on for like a years from now you're gonna have still have reason and purpose to be able to use some of your video for whatever
Facts.
the content, even if you're doing a workshop, like look at where I started or look at where I was working now. So, and it's also good to have that kind of accessibility for newer artists as well. I think a lot of times people think about having something packaged like that as something that you'll get when you've been doing it for years and years, and now like these are the people that have it. But having, if you have all the tools and you have all the information for how to do that kind of setup, there's really no reason that you can't get that kind of ball rolling earlier.
It's true. And I think a lot of people are also very reliant on others to get it without worrying about how to do it themselves. They're like, oh, I did this show, but no one recorded it, so now it's lost. And it's like, well, we can take some agency
Yeah,
over our work.
yeah, like you can be the ones. You can be the
So
ones.
that's what we're trying to do.
I believe in
Try and get you in that footstep.
Yeah, but yeah, also on my side, what's been really cool is so as you guys know, I'm part of an exhibition that is happening currently right now. The last day is August 3rd. So this coming up Saturday is going to be the final day of the yeah, look at us. We did it. We did it. And so like yeah, this coming up Saturday is the final day for the exhibit,
Oh
and it's been
man.
a really cool experience because you'll get like randomly throughout the day, like somebody will like either post it on the story or they'll message me
Yeah.
directly and they'll be like, I was watching this in the exhibit and it was really cool, or I saw something as part of the exhibit and I wanted to get your thoughts on it or something like that. So it's been cool having like your work presented somewhere that you are outside of the space where you can explain it or you can break it down and you can say, well, this is what's happening with my work here. It's like people just have spaces to react. And so I also think it provides a space where like now I have to be a little bit more tactical about what I'm presenting and how I'm presenting my work so that the audience can get what I want them to have, and not necessarily the explanation that I can give as a person, outside of it. So that's been pretty cool. A couple of the things that are in there, I have a short film. I'm calling like a short film collage, so it's kind of like four short films all put together. I told you, like, Jeff is one of the actors in this in the short film. Academy Award, I think, for the whitest shirt in production. That was, I don't know what he did, what kind of bleach he was using, but man, run that commercial. They just they deserve the funds.
Snuggie. Does Snuggie even make? Did they just do
I
fabric
think it's just
softener?
fabric softener.
Is that all
That's
they
not gonna
did? They
get it
wash
clean.
too.
That's
I just like the bear.
I just like the bear. I just want to make sure that guy gets his praise. I mean, he's
Snuggie, if you're watching this, you can pay.
It'd be funny. We just get like an email from Snuggie. He's like, "We like what you had to say.
We saw.
Come on to the team. Give up poetry.
Yep.
Just be teddy bears now." But yeah, so I mean, there's that. Have like the short film collage, and then I also shot and was part of the directing team for the short film slash poem that Ajane wrote. So Where Black Girls Go is the name and the title of the of that short film, and it's really cool because it's the treatment for like how it's presented is like there's like this screening area, and then like everything else around it is like painted red, so it kind of gives like Mars as an aesthetic, and so essentially it's like the entire idea. And I don't want to like spoiler alert the situation, so I'm not gonna tell you everything about it, but just think like girls go to Mars, right? But that was like a really fun thing to kind of be part of the production for and to kind of write for. We're doing a document. Well, okay, I'm gonna come clean with everybody out here. So there's a documentary, right? There's for sure a documentary. So we ended up like being like, okay, we're gonna do the documentary for sure. Like, this past like Thursday, like last Thursday, we were like, we're for sure doing the documentary, and so by the time I was like promised, like, oh, the documentary is gonna be ready on Friday. Like I had not had anything in the edit bay or anything. We didn't even have a name for it yet. Before I was just like, oh, I could for sure deliver it. So there's been a lot of like 2-3 hours sleep nights, but
For her show?
for this coming up.
Okay.
So for the closing,
Which
but
is like next week.
it's this week. It's Friday.
So
So if it's gonna be done. If you come on Friday, you're gonna watch a documentary that I made for sure.
Poets, can we get organized? Like, can we just get organized so we're not like doing this like 2 days before
It's gonna be
a
great.
full documentary?
It's gonna be amazing. This is how I planned my wedding. Actually, I was just like, this is gonna for sure happen. I just gotta figure out what I'm wearing. What do people kind of do?
You chose blood.
I did
I want
choose
to wear blood. I want to wear blood.
That's horrible.
All right.
But yeah, so I'm really excited for that, and I'm really excited because today I'll say one of our guests, we have a guest.
Is your sound working, by the way? Is this
I am.
gonna work?
Okay,
Okay, you're good.
Yep, I can hear you. Yep. Okay, cool. So our guest that we have on the show today is actually somebody. Like, there's a lot of things that I can say as far as just like general community, and I'm gonna start with myself, and I'm gonna expand out. So Tyiesha Radford Shorts is a person that, as a community member, has pushed me and encouraged me in ways that are like foundational to or the freedom that I feel in my creation like now. There's a lot of people that, when you get on stages or when you perform places, that like they'll give you encouragement in certain ways that are important as well. But I think that one of the ways that she speaks into you, as well as one of the ways that she just handles you as an artist or as a person in community, I think there's like so much love and compassion, but there's also like genuine curiosity and intrigue into your process and who you are as a person and what your art is doing to and for you, and kind of ways that you can improve yourself, or you can improve like that kind of part of the process. And I think that there's some people, both in the city and just kind of in general, that I can say like without them I wouldn't feel the kind of freedom and the curiosity that I feel right now with my work, if not for like her encouragement and how she sees you as more than just You know, person producing thing into open mic area, person producing thing into art space. Like she actually views you as a person is like looking to see like the betterment of yourself, and then as a subsequent of that, like the art being better.
So she's to blame.
She's that's fair. That's fair. I am gonna blame her. But then yeah, outside of that, one the other thing when it comes to like just the artist piece or the general artist piece, Tyiesha is one of those people that they'll go to the open mic and you'll see them all the time at the open mic and you'll be like, I feel like she has a poem. I feel like Tyiesha has a poem. And then Tyiesha will even be like, maybe I have a poem. I don't feel like performing. Not today. Blah, blah, blah. And then I remember the first time I saw Tyiesha Reed was not with even in the first 6 months of me knowing Tyiesha. So imagine this. I'm like, oh, this is who Tyiesha is. And then Tyiesha performs a poem and I'm like, wow. So every time from here on out. And I just remember just watching this. I think there was like like a certain development that comes with like both research and just like engagement that again not a lot of people kind of take as seriously as maybe they should. I know for sure I don't take it as seriously as I should all the time. But Tyiesha is a researcher and a researcher that is able to take that research and that knowledge and translate it into some incredibly genuine and authentic art. She has an exhibit that I want her to talk about a little bit more, but she has an exhibit that is actually stationed right next to my exhibit in the urban art space. Currently, she was an integral part of the short film Where Black Girls Go, and she gave some incredibly crucial interview space in the documentary that is for sure happening on Friday. I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and my cousin Dan, everybody clap it up. Tyiesha Radford Shorts.
Thank you. Thank you. You started off really good and you got kind of rocky because you were telling untruths, but you brought it back. You brought it back. And so I'm grateful for the introduction.
That's fair.
Can you hear me? Was I muted?
I like to mix it in. News.
The untruths.
No, that's us. You're good.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That was a warm introduction. I definitely have to take Matthias everywhere now. Like you got with me. Cause yeah, I'm definitely feeling myself. I've been gassed these last few days. So thank you. Thank you.
It's all true. I think that one of the things that's really important that I don't think gets as much publicity and being a community member is like not treating people like they're regular. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times it's like if you're around somebody and you're around somebody who like even if they're incredibly talented and everybody else can see they're incredibly talented and you can see that they're incredibly talented and they have like something that to really provide and give to the world, but like because of your proximity you just treat them like, oh, it's just Ty. And that's how I do, to be clear. That's how I'm gonna act outside of the podcast. But I want to be clear, it is really important that people understand that like the dynamic, like that you have incredibly dynamic people around you that I think in order for them to flourish, it can't just be everybody else saying it. It has to be people that are close to them that can kind of see their personality and see their work, but then also see their spirit, because like a lot of people aren't going to be able to see the spirit. Like they can see your spirit and be like, nah, like you're doing something right now that is like impactful, and speaking on that as opposed to just letting that be like, oh, but they know this. Like, nah, it's really important. People got to know.
Yeah, and I'm a Taurus, so I'm loud.
What is Ford as a company has to do?
Wow. So I'm never gonna wait for somebody else to like promote my friends, promote the people around me, promote the things that they do. Like I think your stuff is dope. Just having the courage to step out and do something that you really love. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate. So yeah, I'm absolutely going to gas everybody. Like this is absolutely a wonderful exhibit. It's a wonderful book. It's a wonderful collection of poetry. It's a wonderful, right? Like because it is, right? And some of that is subjective, some of that is taste. But there's also a way that we in community with one another make each other better. There are ways that we borrow from each other that enhances the work that we do. There's a way that we recall to memory, right? Certain things that kind of, just really make our work dynamic in certain kinds of ways. And so, yeah, I'm gonna promote the crew for sure, for sure, for sure.
100%. So wait, did you have any questions that you want to
Yeah,
ask, or we
let's
want to
talk, so
jump in?
let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the gallery and things like that, if that's okay with
Oh, we
you.
can start there.
Yeah, that's so this I'm still like reeling to a degree because this exhibit that is currently showing is only technically my second time. But the two exhibitions that I've had in some ways ran concurrently. And the very first one that I did was a sound bath, and it was literally just a sound bath and a red light and a bench. And it didn't feel as representative of the piece. And so when Ajane was bringing this exhibition to life, she really gave us permission to make it reflective of the work, make it reflective of who we are. And so I really had an opportunity to give this some thought, really had an opportunity to think about um, what's the feeling I want people to feel when they hear my words, when they see certain visuals. What are some things that I want the audience to call into memory? And so, more specifically, I have a piece called The Legend of John Henry.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is a poem about my paternal grandfather. So, both of my parents are from West Virginia, so Black Appalachian ancestry, which means a lot of things. I'm sure we'll get into it. That's a part of my research, a part of my master's work. Um, but this particular piece was a way for me to reflect on a man who I never met, a man who passed before I was born, but who I know in many ways very intimately because of the memories of family members, of older cousins, of my father, of my grandmother, because she outlived him for many years. And so I really wanted to give um, I wanted to be deliberate, right, about how to bring the memory of this man who is the whole reason why my family is in Columbus and the whole reason why we have certain experiences that we've had. How do I bring that memory to life for other folks? And so I'll stop there because I'm sure there are specific questions that you have, but that's the piece. And there's some visuals that kind of go along with it, some audio that kind of goes along with it that I think make it a way more dynamic piece.
Well, and one of the things that so I want to share my experience with this piece, but I'll share it in a second. I want to talk about it in a second. One thing that I do want to kind of touch on is something that I didn't really know 100% until like you just said it, which was there was a previous kind of incarnation of this piece that was like kind of like just like the sound bath, right? Or and like because of the nature of the space that you had and naturally what shout out to Ajane, the kind of the space that Ajane kind of gave us to be able to kind of explore our space, you're able to kind of grow it into what it currently is right now. And I'm sure that if you had the like opportunity in space, which I like we're gonna make sure you do for sure. Absolutely. But like if like you can absolutely kind of grow it in other aspects like as well. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really excited for our audience to hear as well, which is like, not every single situation in space is going to be like the full vision and the full element that you really want, right? You're going to be presented with some spaces that are like, well, hey, you have a sound bath, but what can you do with that? So even though you might have had the entirety of this set, and I don't want to, I'm not, I'll let you do, I don't want to go
Oh,
too
I
deep
don't
into it, but
mind. I don't
I don't
mind.
want it to be spoiled because I really want y'all to like y'all got to see what's going on here. But it's just to say that like there is there's a fuller vision of what you have or of what you had initially in place right now, and you weren't, but you also weren't afraid to be like, well, I have this fuller vision, And if I can't get the full revision done, then I don't want anything done. You were like, okay, there's ways that I can get my work incorporated into other spaces. Did you have the idea that, regardless of how it's looking with just a sound bath, I want there to be additional pieces and like things on it as well? Or were you thinking like, okay, once I have it out there now, like that is the art, like, and I'm gonna move on?
Yeah. So initially, when I first made the piece, there wasn't an idea of anything visual or any additional audio
Mm.
connected to it. But one of the things that I find vitally important as I do the work that I do with regard to Black Appalachia is reorienting people to what it means or what it symbolizes for Black bodies to be in a space that we customarily associate with Appalachia, right? So, what does it mean to see a Black mountain man? What does it mean to
Mm.
hear about a Black mountain man? What does it mean to understand certain counties in Appalachia overlap certain counties that we deem as the South, right? And so many of us have Appalachian ancestry. We just don't know it because it hasn't been categorized in that way. So one of the things that I absolutely was like, I gotta do was to have a visual kind of element to it and making sure that people saw as minimally, as it turned out to be, this connection to land, right? This understanding that I'm talking about a very particular place and representing a very particular kind of place. And the only other thing that I did that I was really kind of like, this is a necessary enhancement, was I re-recorded the poem. There's a quarry park in Dublin, I believe, and it is like a bird sanctuary. And so if you go really early in the morning, or if you go in the evening, the birds they're singing to each other. They're symbolizing, like, this is the kind of work I'm doing. This is the space I'm in. Like, right, very elaborate conversation that they're having one with another. And because there are so many trees, because it is by running water, and all of these things are my memories of West Virginia. So being by the creek bed, being in the trees, going down in the hollow, all those things. I wanted that sound to also accompany the memory that I was sharing. And so I will offer this spoiler alert: when you do go and visit the exhibit and you hear the sound bath, it's not just my voice, it's also birds, it's also wind song in the background to, again, reorient the audience into space and recognizing that Black folk have a very particular and almost tactile understanding of this same space that we've been denied of for so long.
Yeah. I think, and there's some. So I think this is a good opportunity. I want to talk to y'all about like my experience with this installation, and I think like this is like, it was a very transformative, like, I think, experience for me when it comes to like like understanding that my engagement with the art should be whatever the artist intends, because I was actually there when they were setting up Tyiesha's installation, and I remember or like I think as components were coming in for it, so maybe not during the entirety of time, but maybe as components were coming. But there was just a point where I was like looking at it, and I'm just like, this looks cool. Like, and I'm reading, like, I'm like, I understand like the intro, like we had like other meetings where we're kind of talking about stuff. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is really cool. And then like I'm seeing like the projector kind of like the projector space. I'm like, this is really cool. But I was really apprehensive about actually kind of stepping into this space, as far as like there's a rocking chair, and as like, to me, I'm like, the rocking chair is part of the art, so I should probably not sit in the
Wait, the
in the
rocking
chair.
chair you sat in when we did our film thing?
I didn't. I never sat in it.
Okay.
Remember when I was just like, I really want to sat in it, but I probably shouldn't sit in it. But that is so me and Jeff. That's actually so funny. So me and Jeff were shooting the film, and I was like, oh man, like I really want to sit in this chair, but like I feel like if I sit in a chair and like I probably shouldn't. Probably should not sit in the chair because it's part of the art, and I don't want to like mess up the art. But it was just so funny because I had been in there a couple times with the space, everything put together, and like, I'm like kind of going around talking to people, taking pictures and stuff like that. And I saw this was like my third or fourth time I saw a kid sitting in the chair, and like kind of positioning himself kind of in the chair, like he's rocking in the chair, like kind of watching. And I think that was the first time I was just like, okay, people are sitting in the chair. I can sit in the chair. And the first time that I really sat down and just like really soaked it in from
Oh
like
no, how
being in
much
the
damage
seat,
you do? Oh,
no,
oh,
none.
oh, oh, oh.
But the first time I was able to sit there and really take it in, I was like, oh, like this is a really, again, to be clear, aesthetically it's a really good exhibit. Like I feel like I'm getting a sense, like, again, I don't want to spoil too much, but I feel like you're gonna really get the sense of what Tyiesha is bringing forward from just the aesthetics of the set, right? But I think when you actually sit in the chair and you're listening to the sound bath, and again, it's also something that's so interesting because it's like I think when I'm hearing like the birds, I'm hearing the other sound. For some reason in my head, I thought I was doing that. Like I was like in my head, like that's just something that's happening in my brain. Like,
I am the
man,
birds.
I am the birds. And so, but it's like you get teleported into this like other space, and like the closest thing that I can really even think to like kind of put it, this is like, okay, I liken things to like movies a lot, so like follow me here. In Minority Report, the one with Tom Cruise, there is like this scene with the precogs, and the precogs are essentially like they're going through all their memories because they remember everything. So everybody else's memories, everybody else's future and past, like they have all these memories kind of sorted through, and like so essentially when they're thinking of something, they're traveling. So there's like these like directional rays and like these images that kind of pop up, and like that's what it felt like. It felt like I'm not just like me in this space, like I'm remembering things that other people are remembering, and other people have remembered to remember to tell people and to like communicate. And it was so weird because it was like there was like a level of both separation because there is a like, I'm reaching through time, but also like a familiarity because just like you're saying, like there's things that we find community with, like that we find connection with, that are like they might be removed from our physical experience, but there is something that's like in our genes, that's like just in our sense memory that we can travel back to and really have that connection with. And I think that it was something that I never really thought to try to tackle. Like in my head, I'm like, y'all could just watch this film and we could be done with it. So the fact that you were like, okay, I can create this experience within this space, and it's like it hits exact like and it's really weird because I don't know how you did it. You know what I mean? Like that's not even something I don't think I have access to being able to pull. It's like you understood the exact thing that the viewer would want or the viewer would need to understand something. And and maybe I don't even understand it 100%, you know what I mean? But it's like 100% greater than when I was standing outside of the exhibit. So can you maybe talk a little bit about like kind of that experience, or like kind of what it meant for you to really put the viewer or the audience or the like the watcher like inside of this exhibit?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think I was heartened kind of when you shared with me what your experience was, because that's definitely what I was going for. But you never know, right? Once you put the work out there, you never know how it's going to be received. Um, and so I'm really grateful for you kind of offering your feedback and kind of sharing your experience. Like I said, it's about my paternal grandfather. He passed before I was born, but all of the memories that I have of him um, are from other folk, and these are memories that are told over and over and over again. Right? It's not just perhaps I'm going through a photo album and somebody's telling me this story one time. This is literally the way that my family related and relates to one another. So he used to have his granddaughters oil his scalp, right, and scratch dandruff from his hair, and he used to pay them money, right, to do that. He died of a cirrhotic liver, right, and so he drank very frequently, and so that's a part of right, and so um, in addition to having these elements in the piece, I really wanted to illustrate, right, to the folk who kind of are here, what it's like to be in a space where you know so much about the person, but the person is absent, right? And so, um, um, how do you make them appear, right? Even though they're not there, how do you let all of your other senses and all of the things that are tied to memory do that labor for you and kind of create the vision? And so that ended up being just kind of like the guiding light for me for this particular exhibit. And I have some other ideas about some things to kind of enhance it even more. But I think, yeah, just wanting to recreate the same experience that I've had and trying to figure out who this man is, what his motivations were, what are the things that he saw and experienced, what are the things that he loved, what are the things he didn't enjoy as much, and how do I bring that? How do I represent that in this exhibition piece? Another thing that I'll say is, Matthias, you've actually, all of the times that I performed this piece publicly, you were present, which I don't think has happened for any other piece that I've had where one person other than myself has been present. And so the first time I performed it at Freedom a la carte, the second time I performed it at ISED's Foundation, and there was a memorial service. The third time that I presented it was through Ajané and Urban Art Space off of Ohio Avenue. There was a Airbnb situation that was kind of reserved. And then the fourth-ish iteration of this is what you hear through the sound bath. And all of those are different to a degree. There were tweaks that were done. There were adjustments that were made. And so there's also this way in which I am telling this story and retelling this story in conversation with audiences. I'm noting reactions, I'm noting responses, I'm hearing how things sound, and I'm like, nah, that ain't right. That's not how I remember it, right? And so then I will go back and make certain edits so that it ultimately sounds the way that it does now. So a lot of this was really kind of active and in real time of how do I capture a series of memories about a person, and then how do I then relay those memories in the same fashion that they were relayed to me.
Yeah, I think there's like a real, and again, I mean, I'm to be clear, like I feel like because we talk outside of this, I feel like there's I don't want to say things that are like maybe things about other things. So like as far as like other stuff that you have planned for this work, but I will say like I feel like there's like such an incredible potential for especially like stuff like a one woman show or like just like kind of because I even think about like the content being so similar to the process that you even described, right? Because it's like, and I think in embodying like even like an experience and like being like, okay, I'm putting you in the space of this experience. I think there's something like there's that thing that happens like kind of close to the end of the poem, and I don't want to like give too much because I really want I don't know and again we'll talk I don't know in what space that you are gonna get this work if you have not been able to come to the exhibit or you have not seen Tyiesha perform this before. I don't know in what exact space you're gonna encounter it for the first time. I don't want it to be from me explaining it to you. I want you know what I mean. Like I really want you to be like getting it from like because I'll do it and I don't. I'm just trying. I don't want y'all to get spoiled. I don't want no spoilers. But it's just to say that like whatever that space is, I think there's something really special about the fact that it's like that there are these tweaks, that there are these differences, because like even if I as a person am explaining my own experience, if I explain my own experience that happened today, if I explain it next week, it's gonna be different than in 5 years. Like somebody's like, okay, can you tell us about like how that podcast? There might be different things that I'm explaining and things like that. And I think there's like something really special about like kind of because art or what the section that our exhibits are on that like it's like thank God for blood memory, right? So it's like this thought that like I don't think that there is like blood memory or the way that I think about it. It has like a necessary fidelity to like being the same every time, right? It's like there's no I the way that you are memorizing this or memory like the way that the memory is happening, that you can't allow like there is like you can't allow any kind of other elements in, or like any kind of other like kind of mysticism or kind of like a degree of like folklore like into this memory. And I think that kind of along the lines with like again something changing kind of over time, just this idea that you're experiencing a memory of somebody's memory, right? And there are changes that happen, and there might even be changes in the performance, which is like kind of the thing that happens with memory as well. Like memory kind of transitions and changes, and sometimes it enhances, and sometimes I think we were talking last time we were around each other about like just like poems that we've written where it's like, oh, we're writing about somebody's telling us something, and I'm like, wait a minute, that can't be, that's not true. But it's like that's what like they believe it because that is kind of how memory works. So I just think it's really special, and I think you have something that is like incredibly special and incredibly like it's it's really hard to access. Like it's not even just like the degree of writer that you are, but it's also like the direction that you went in your writing. You know what I mean?
I appreciate that. I think it's getting increasingly harder not to convince people, or increasingly harder to convince people that I didn't pay you for these remarks. But yes,
I'll just expect my cash app after. We don't talk about recording, but
I don't even
that's
have Cash App. See how that
that's
works.
fair.
Um, so yes, I will say this, and I know this is not necessarily directly where you're going, but I think it's important, and maybe this is a great place to put it. Um, So this particular piece, because there's a way that I talk about my family, there's a way that I talk about personal experiences, and try to connect it to broader narratives on blackness, on being, on memory, on family ties, etc. But this particular piece is the legend of John Henry. For those who don't know, John Henry is a folkloric or mythical character that is based in Appalachia. He was a black man who worked on the railroads and um, was supposed to beat this whole automation process, right? He believed that he could be faster and better than any machine. And so he had a competition between a machine of putting down, laying track, right? And he beat the machine, but he ultimately died at the end, right? It actually literally took his life. And so while that is, lore, there's arguments about whether or not John Henry actually exists, which I found some really great records about. He was an actual man who lived in Tennessee, which is it's blowing my mind. Like my whole fangirl situation is like, okay, wait, we got some places to go. But I used John Henry as the hero, and make him synonymous with my grandfather because I want the way that we tell those kinds of stories, the way that we kind of perpetuate this kind of lore, which is like all the details might not be the same, or some of them we might remember or misremember, but we know, right, that this person lived. We know, right, that they have these kinds of connections. And so everything else is just it. Saida Hartman has a really great term for it. She calls it critical fabulation. Toni Morrison has a similar version. She calls it literary archaeology, right? Where these things happened, we know they happened, and as the artist, we're just filling in the gaps, right? So not necessarily making up stories, not necessarily taking, these really incredible liberties, but filling in the gaps, right? That's how we end up with a beloved. That's how we end up with To Venus, I think is Hartman's piece, right? These ways of like revisiting things from the past and then filling in the gaps. And that's kind of what I attempted to do with this. This is what I attempt to do with much of my work now. And that process is actually, and I know you didn't ask this, that process is actually moving me away from poetry to a degree and moving me toward essay. And it's even moving me toward fiction, which is weird because me and fiction ain't been girlfriends for a long time. Um, but it's it's having me play around with form. It's having me play around with space. It's having me determine what's the best way to tell this story in the way that it is coming to my memory. And so it's a really kind of exciting time for me as well in that regard.
That's really dope. I feel like okay. I feel like I'm like really interested in like these. Did you want to ask a question, Jeff? I don't want to hog
You're
up the
good.
mic
You're
time.
good.
You,
You're ready to go. Go,
oh,
go, go, go.
okay. So I just kind of really kind of touch on I think the kind of the aspect of like going from like poetry to like even like when you're like writing like nonfiction or like really anything that you're writing. I think one of the really cool things is that like the narrative aspect of like taking something that is like grounded in truth and like adding almost like the aspect of like legend around it is always really I think it's really important. It's not just entertaining, it's like important because there is something happens there that is able to be like transferred and really carried for generations because like let's take the question of whether or not the legend of John Henry is like a real it has like real analog and like real space. It's like whether or not it does maybe almost doesn't matter as much as the story and what we get from it. You know what I mean? Like that's almost second, especially in this span of time. Which is just to say that there's something happens that like there's something that's very core that happens with that story that like you might be a little kid and you might just be thinking like, oh great, he won, but then like as an adult you're like like at what was the cost, right? Like what like there was like cost there's more to that story. So it's just to say that I think that it's like really it's always really interesting whenever people that are really good poets that don't perform enough, but I don't want to talk about that. But just people that are really good poets and friends of mine that need to perform at more spaces. Whenever they're like, I want to do other things in the art space, it's like, I'm 100% a proponent for it, especially with this kind of work. But also, B, that's the reason I don't think Wilt Chamberlain really scored 100 points. I just don't think it happened. There's no video of it. Video existed. And I think it was more important to be like somebody could score 100 points. And so people were just like, Wilt Chamberlain, he might not have even existed.
What is?
But I don't know.
Why is Wilt in this?
Here, I'm not going to
Somebody
say
had to say it.
that. But I will say, there's this really interesting relationship. I have to talk from the lens of blackness, right? I can zoom out
Mm.
and talk about Americanness, you know, at a point. But I'm very grounded in blackness, and so I'm coming from that lens. And there's a very particular way that, particularly when it comes to biblical things, religious things, things that are facts, quote unquote, where we are often discouraged from asking questions. We're often discouraged from challenging, right? We're often discouraged from interrogating in certain kinds of ways. But it's when I was younger, I'm like, yo, like Eve just had two boys and then the world was populated. Like how we get there, how we do that. So there are ways that we ask questions and that we interrogate that we want to do that naturally, but then we ultimately become conditioned in a society that tells us not to ask questions or not to interrogate those things. And so I also think it's important as we are telling these stories that we are asking those questions, right? Whether we get the answers or not, right? I have this question right now in my mind. And so I need to find a way to represent that in the work that I'm putting out into the world. So, yeah, lots of questions, lots of retelling of certain kinds of stories, and setting the record straight. And I also think that that's important because there are many ways in which, like Black vital statistics weren't a thing until like the mid 1800s, right? And so the story of somebody's birth, the story of somebody's life, also had to be told in kind of sneaky ways, had to be put in song, had to be put right. There are other ways that we had to tell those stories to work against a certain kind of erasure. And so I'm also encouraging these kinds of stories, this kind of questioning, this kind of narrative telling, so that we can tell our stories as fully as humanly possible in a world that we know is going to erase those narratives every time. And so that's part of why the archival things, the research that I do is so important, because it's like, yes, these things, these documents exist, but they don't tell the full story of these people who lived here. And so, how do we piece these things together? And more importantly, how do we use art, right, to do the labor in some ways of piecing these things together?
For sure. So, and I feel like we might have skipped past this part, so I really want to kind of maybe even re-engage with the beginning. So, Tyiesha Radford shorts, poet for sure, poet for sure, poet for sure. So, if you ever, this is a quick commercial break. If you ever see Tyiesha Radford shorts in a space, and you're just in community with her, and you're having a conversation, oh, your hair looks good, girl, yours too, girl. Okay, I see what you did with them heels. I don't know what y'all be talking about.
I don't know if she talks to you about your hair.
Well, that's people have talked to me about it.
He
So
makes me talk
that's
about his hair, which is so.
I force it. I do force it. But if you're in community with Tyiesha and Tyiesha's like, oh, do you do poetry, girl? There's an open mic here. Do you do poetry? And if Tyiesha says, oh, I dabble, every once in a while. If she ever does anything like that, just like don't swing on her. Like don't do that. Don't do that. Just like
Really don't do that. Let me
just do like this. Do like
quick, because I got hands, so definitely
she do
don't.
got hands. So I don't even want. I don't want you to hurt yourself. I'm telling you that because I don't want y'all to hurt yourself. Okay. So in order to protect yourself, but also still inquire, just kind of look at her. But on Diverse Podcast, Matthias was like, and so now it feels like maybe you got a poem that you should do. So that's just to say, incredible poet, researcher, soon to be a prolific essayist, nonfiction writer, whatever the kind of writing is, Tyiesha is going to be engaged with it. Can you kind of tell us how you started on that journey, or is there any particular point where you're like, I'm for sure an artist, and you can't say this podcast. You have to say years ago. When were you like, I am absolutely an artist of this magnitude and this degree, and I want to go down this path?
So here's the thing, Black people, I don't. And I just had this conversation on Saturday. There's a way that people see my work that I don't share. Like I don't. A big part of the reason, like I know you're joking, but a big part of the reason why I don't emphasize that I'm a poet or that I'm an artist when I'm in spaces is because to me there are so many artists who are better than me, or maybe whose work I think is more deserving of platform. And so I'm working through that. We're getting better. But from a small child, I know you have something crazy to say.
I was see. You see how I was not saying nothing?
No, your face.
But I will
said some things.
I will say anything that you listen. I'm not gonna make no comment on nobody being better than you, Ty. But when I can swear to you right now, there are people that are worse than you that got their name on a business card saying that they poets. Okay, that will tell you they're a poet in the middle of an Arby's when you're just trying to get your big beef and cheddar. There are people that will shout. They got poet tattooed on them. They have stanzas just on their body that they wrote. Okay, they're like, I am the most poety poet ever to poet, and I can promise you that if you had to lock me on a deserted island with just their work,
you wouldn't make it off the island.
It would be kindling. I would be like, oh, I have
my work is not that bad. Come on.
I don't want to say anybody, but I'm just
the tattoos come off.
It's just to say that, like, I think, and I be telling my friends this because I just happen to be friends with people that are incredibly talented poets. But when I'm telling you that when you are saying that you're not a poet, then like what you're saying is that there is somebody out there right now that is walking around claiming poet. There are people, there are swaths of people that are claiming poet that are like, and I don't think they shouldn't. I don't even think they shouldn't. I think they should be claiming poet. I think they should be They should be just as proud as being a poet as anybody else. But what I'm saying, Ty, is that if you're saying that you don't want to claim poet on the merits of the amount of work, all it takes is one poem, so you're already there. If you're talking about the quality of work, you've been there for as long as you've been writing. I promise you that. So just understand, like I don't want it shouldn't be me. You should if you just look out there into the expanse, and me and you've been in them same rooms before, Ty. You know,
We have. We
there's people that's like I'm a poet, and I want them to feel comfortable as being a poet. But oh my God, like Ty, you're a poet, okay,
so I
for
will say
sure.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, and I'm gonna leave that there. Okay. I have been
Don't let me
writing.
get mad again.
No, 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 no.
I'll turn
Never,
up.
never, never. I have been writing, like trying to create stories. Like, I got into poetry a little bit later, but I wrote my first little short story. I was in like the second or third grade, and it was a little love story about some little big head boy that I was in class with, and it ended up being a love story. It's somewhere in storage. When I find it, I'm going to put it out so people can, so we can celebrate my growth in community. But
We need
I've been
that.
writing for a long time, but that's because I've been reading for a long time. So
Mm.
I always joke and say that if there's a way for me to just read books and that like earn a living from that, I would do it. I love being immersed in the writing and the work of other people. I love being immersed in the thought process of other people. I love being immersed in the historiography of what led to people becoming the types of artists that they are. Like, I'm just really, I think you mentioned it earlier, but I'm actually a genuinely curious person. Like, I want to know, like, how does that make you feel? Like, this is good news, but sometimes people will be like, I'm indifferent, right? I want to know those things. I want to know, like, how people tick, how their brains work, how their heart feels, right? Like, what is a color do for them or sound like to them? Like, I really am asking all these questions because I'm always immersed in other people's work. And by being immersed in other people's work, I can't help but start to create work of my own, right? What do I think about this situation? How do I feel about this situation? What is this memory tied to? What is this emotion, right, making me think about? And so my earliest publication happened in high school. I wrote in the yearbook my freshman year in representation of the entire freshman class, which is a story in and of itself. By my junior year, I was performing poetry through a Black student organization. I performed poetry as my talent in a beauty pageant freshman year of college. And so my art has been in all of these different platforms because I've been in all of these different platforms. I'm curious about these things. And so I end up there, and somehow my work kind of comes with me. And so, yeah, I think people like gravitating to my thing, to my work, and the things that I put out, and connecting to it in a way is what makes me kind of continue to share these things publicly. I'll always be an artist. I'll always write. I have things that I've written that no one will likely see. But to continue to share them publicly in the way that I have, as long as it resonates with folk, as long as somebody else is in community with me writing about these things, as long as it gives permission to somebody else to do the kinds of work that they love, then I'll keep doing it for sure.
And I think kind of what you were sharing just now is something that we talk about a lot with our audience as far as like I think with your journey, pretty much you have like all these spaces that feel like they have very little connectivity to each other. But because you are the vessel through those spaces, writing also happens in those spaces, and like your work also enters into those spaces. And I think that like we talk a lot about like people they have a very conventional view of this is where poetry goes. I'm gonna perform in a library, at a coffee shop, at this. But it's like you're able to enter or have your work exist in these spaces, and because of the fact that it's part of your identity, which that's might be the reason why you just never should drop the title of poet. But that's not. I'm not going to talk about it. But it's just to say that I know Jeff talks about it a lot as well, which is just that there are ways to have your work in spaces that aren't just the conventional. Oh, I just wrote this poem and it's gonna go in this journal. I just wrote this poem and I'm gonna perform at an open mic. So I think it's just really cool to see that. I also think there is a way where it's like you're not necessarily I think there's a way for institutions to kind of train you into that mentality to where like they're like in order for you to honor our institution, this is how you have to kind of play by these rules and what have you. But it's like you have like a freedom around your work that allows you to carry your work pretty much into any space that you're permitted, you're welcomed. So
Yeah, and
it's
I'll say this: I don't want to diminish journals. I don't want to diminish
oh
open
yeah.
mics or slams or anything like that. I'm not saying that you are. I'm saying I don't want to get the impression that I'm doing that, because those spaces are absolutely valuable and in many ways offer platform to Black artists, Black writers, that other spaces have denied. So I definitely want to emphasize and underscore their value. I also will say that a big part of the reason why I haven't been in traditional spaces is because um, I ended up separated from those spaces at like very early on when I was like really getting serious about poetry. So there was a time in high school where I started out going to it said workshops, poetry workshops at Snaps and Tabs. I didn't have no business in there. I was only 14, 15. But I'm there at the workshops and then I'm staying for the open mic. And ended up being disconnected for whatever reason from poetry spaces in Columbus for a very long time, for almost a decade. So I missed a lot of the slam poetry. I missed certain kinds of development through open mic nights, through self-publishing chapbooks, through any types of like poetry publication. And I had to find community in other spaces. So, in addition to my curiosity, in addition to just like, this is just where I am, it's also like, dang, I'm still writing, I'm still creating, I still want to put this stuff out into the world. How do I do that in these non traditional spaces? And fortunately, I've had really great experiences with that, where people have been really receptive, where people have been really collaborative. There are so many scholars, there are so many musicians, there are so many historians, there are so many. I'm working with a blue, I call them my blue collar team, but they do some landscaping. My father did some landscaping before he passed. Writing some little vignettes so that they can give to their family members, right, as love notes, right? And so just kind of seeing the ways that we operate in our full humanity and how art can show up as an extension of that and not as something separate from that. Um, so yeah.
That's really dope. I think something also to hit on as well, like, I think there's a lot of times people can feel like if they have not written for a very long time, then that path is just kind of cut off from them. And there's a lot of people that like for a much less amount of time that like there's people that have been like, oh, I haven't been going out to open mics or writing for like a year, maybe 2 years. Like life just kind of got caught up with them. And then after that, they'll make the decision that okay, I just can't really re-engage or re-enter with those spaces kind of fully. And so it's really inspiring to kind of hear that you're like there's like this and shout out also our praise due to is said our ancestor. He was also one of the people that was really impactful in my journey. If you're from Columbus and you are at all interested in understanding kind of the lineage of writers in Columbus, I don't think that there's many places that are better to start off with like just researching it said.
And even if you're not
And
from Columbus, if you
yeah, well,
pass
yeah,
through Columbus, if you hit an open mic stage in Columbus, if you've been in, through, by, near Columbus, it said it's absolutely somebody, a name you should know.
with one so it's a like and this kind of ties to what we're talking about now as well. But I think by the time that I knew it said had he had done so many things that like when we're talking about like work ethic, we're talking about
Mhm.
the plays, when we're talking about like just ways that your art can show up. I think it said was one of those people that really instilled in me like don't be afraid to figure out where else your poems can go.
That's
Figure
it.
out like oh like what else can we do? We would go to like we would go to hot times, just like the poetry fest, any opportunity or scenario. There was like an open mic that I think it said saw on like Facebook, and he like hits me up and he's just like, we're going to an open mic, tomorrow, and like and mind you, there's only about three people, especially at that time in Columbus, that like could like put me on assignment when it came to poetry, and like it
Mhm.
said is one of them. It said is like, this isn't, you're not going to have a good time here, Matthias. Like you're going here because that poem that you did the other night, it was not good, and I want you to be better than that. And I feel like, but it was also for me as a as a writer and somebody who is looking at the landscape of Columbus and thinking like, okay, what can I add, or like what is it that I can add? I think Iset is one of those people that was just like, add everything. Oh, you're a poet right now? Okay, great. But if you want to write a play, don't write the play.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
don't wait for it. Write the play. Wow, what I mean? You can put these things together and like just like looking like if you had the opportunity, if you're blessed with the kind of opportunity to be able to like be in his home and kind of see just even how he had a deep like reverence for art and for
mhm,
other people's art, and again, I can't stress this enough, for his community's art. Like
yeah,
when you're thinking of great writers and you're thinking about like people that are just incredible performers or what have you, if you can't put your hand or your name or like or a name to like somebody in your community that's around you, then you're not doing enough. Like you should be out there more. You should be collecting more, because he had, if he had all naturally his books, for sure he had books from people that you would expect, but he also, like anybody that I've ever known in Columbus to drop a book, to drop a poetry album or something like that, it was in his home. You know
mhm.
what I mean? Like, and it was just really beautiful to see, and it was really beautiful to be in that space, and it was a really great example that I'll never forget. Which is just to say, that kind of bringing it back to, I think, your work, because I think that there is a lot of times there's this understanding that you have to be working on poems in this specific way for your entire life. But I'm like am in conversation with Iset, who he had been doing poetry for 4 or 5 decades before me and him ever met. And he was like, I do poetry here, I do playwrights, I do this, I do this. There's all kinds of stuff. And he's just like, I'm doing everything that I can while I can. And he was one of the people that made incredible use of his time while he was here. So just to say that, yeah, just this, I think that this understanding that you were out of the scene, so to speak, for like 10 years, and then when you came back, it was like you're you were in spaces where you had these opportunities to kind of grow and really manifest your art into these spaces. Can you talk a little bit about like what it felt like really kind of re-engaging after that 10 years, and like had your work changed in any kind of way, or how did your work change?
yeah. So, real quick, I also want to just give a huge shout out to Isaiah for his intergenerational model. A lot of poets work with their peers, but as folks get older, they also continue to work with their peers, right? They don't always reach back and work with younger artists. And so, shout out to him because he always had somebody younger than him. He had folks who were his peers too. He always had folks who were younger than him, who he was encouraging, who he was mentoring, who he was kind of showing the ropes. Um, and so, to me, poetry specifically, but writing generally, art generally, is a collaborative process. It's a communal process, and you have to have crew. You have to have people who um, that you do work with, that you commiserate with, that you compete with to a degree, but definitely just to make sure that you're tight and on your game, and they're tight and on their game. You have to have people around you who are willing to stick their neck out for you, who are willing to offer platform for you, right? So there's a very particular way that your crew, your I don't want to call it a clique, but the people, your riders, right? Like the people who you're with, that you need that around you. In 2016, uh, Dr. Melissa Crum was facilitating TEDx Columbus Women's Stage. And this was the first time TEDx Columbus Women, if people are familiar with the TEDx platform, it's usually like, short-ish lectures, right? Or speeches, some type, in some instances, interactive spaces, but mostly somebody is delivering an address to the audience anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes. The TEDx Columbus Women of 2016 platform was all performances. So I think there was a belly dancer. I think there was a hip hop artist. I think somebody was singing. And I was invited to do a poem. And I hadn't written anything original. Um, it had probably been 4 or 5 years at that point. Um, I wrote an original piece for that, so it was an occasional piece, but it was something. It was about my sister and my mother. It was a kind of an intergenerational dialogue about maternity and our understanding of motherhood, etc. And so that was kind of my re-entry back into the poetry landscape. And I had people who were working with me on the piece, trying to help me memorize the piece, all of those things. And so I definitely credit uh, Black women poets in Columbus: Kimberly Braswell, Dion Custer Edwards, Nakia Frabetto, Barbara Fant, Rose Smith, Isetta Thomas, Tiffany Smith, Karen Scott, oh God, Stevie Knighton, um, Cynthia Moa, Tasha Lomo, right? I'm Tiffany Kendrick. There's so many names, and I have to bring them into the space, and I have to acknowledge them because their work served as examples, but then their community served as a safe space, right? It served as an incubation for me of like, you're a writer who doesn't write, right? And so now we just got to get you back onto the writing side so that you can present your work openly and in the public. And so that's been huge. I mean, there are men who are in the Columbus landscape as well. I don't want to discriminate, but so much of my work, so much of my intimate spaces are occupied by women, and more specifically Black women. And there was a certain vulnerability and intimacy that came with rebirthing new work and then putting that back out into the world, that they were able to serve as midwives too, and kind of help me kind of reintegrate into the space.
That's beautiful. Wait, also, did I don't I so I feel like I'm monopolizing. I don't want to monopolize. Did you have anything you wanted to cut in with, or?
Jeff, you're gonna have to ask me a question before I get off this line. So I need to you're gonna have to think of something. Even if it's just what's my favorite color, what brings me pleasure,
No,
what
no, it's not that I don't have questions. I got questions. Um,
Here, I'll comment real quick, and then I'll throw a question to you. I just want to cut. So one thing that I want to say is that if you've ever been around the group of women that Tyiesha just explained, first of all, they be hazing people. So I don't. They be making fun of, and the thing is, I don't want to make it like a thing where they be kind of making fun of me. But I'm just saying sometimes we feel a little bit rough. But ultimately,
I'm saying
it's nothing but.
because is your name even Matthias? That's all I'm gonna
Wait,
say.
what?
I
Wait,
said I need to see your birth certificate because is your name
scratch off the screen. Get it off the screen. Get it off the
no,
screen, Jeff. Get it off the screen.
see how we don't how we don't even really want
Get it
to
off the screen.
see how we don't even really want to tell the truth. We want to because you didn't introduce yourself. I knew you as Matthias, and then as Matthew, and then I knew you as Monticello. I knew you as Montel.
You never know. You know what?
And like, what is your name? But go ahead.
You know what? That's fine.
Go ahead.
That's fine. Well, listen. That's
We've been on this call for an hour. This is my fault. I wasn't even gonna go there. But since we're
you know
here,
what? That's fair. I did take it there. You know what? You're right. You're right. And ladies, that's a perfect example of gaslighting. But anyway, so but yeah, no. If you ever been around them, I feel like one of the really cool things is that, and then I think there's like definitely like a different level of kind of like intimacy when it comes like, kind of women being around each other, but it's just like the kind of energy that they all give up, because again, these are all incredibly accomplished people, and people that are like outside of just you knowing them. They're just good people to know, right? And they're good people to know if you want to learn about like dedication to community and like dedication to people. But like as far as dedication to craft, like it's like I'm listening to them perform, or I'm like looking at their work and I'm thinking like, if these are poems, then what have I been writing this whole time? Like what have I been doing? Because these aren't the same things. But yeah, no, it's just to say like it's really important. And I think this is also something that a lot of our audience can kind of take away, when it comes to like community, because Tyiesha's able to like name off specific people in the community that not only impact her on a personal community, like like almost familial way, but also push her as an artist and push her as like a tactician in her craft. And that's something that there's no way to put a value number on that. There's no way that if you're thinking about like growing in your craft, that you can't really bypass that as a metric. Like you're gonna need that.
Absolutely. And so all the names I named are not members of the Giovanni Collective, because that's what Matthias is referencing when he says the organizations I'm a part of. But the Giovanni Collective is a non-hazing organization. We
Put
are
me back on the screen, Jeff.
we're communal in many ways, and we love everybody who loves
So
us.
y'all ain't never said nothing about me then.
No, never. We love your
All
work.
right, then.
We love your
Not
work.
you, but your work.
We're gonna cut this. Next time y'all get to talk, I'm gonna bring this clip up.
I don't say nothing about you now. If anybody else does, that's on them. But I've never said an
I
uncool
listen.
thing about you.
I gotta put my politician on. Everybody in the Giovanni Collective, they're important to the culture,
Hmm.
to the craft, and you should follow them and get to know them. But outside of that, but yeah, just very genuinely, yes. Everybody, shout out to Giovanni Collective. Shout out to everybody that is just working artists, or just like artists like that are in that space, because it's clear. There's clear evidence that you are doing incredible, impactful work. Just because even if like from the people that are outside of the collective, people are also just inspired by the fact of y'all activated in the work that you're doing. So shout out to y'all, and just be nice to me sometimes.
I'm always nice to you. I feel like that's not reciprocated, but I'm always nice to you. I mean, I've got receipts. It's okay. It's all right.
Wow, Jeff, you had questions?
Or comments, or
Yes.
any discussion.
Not on this. Not in this
And
direction.
ain't nobody think about it.
Um, Tyiesha, you've mentioned a lot about archiving, and it's a lot of it has been in reference to archiving other people's work and your own kind of family. But these projects that you're involved in take on a lot of different components, just in terms of the audio, the physical artifacts, for instance, like the chair, finding notes and things like that. What do you think is a poet's responsibility in terms of archiving their own work?
So that's a difficult question for me, in large part because um, I don't often consider the way that my voice about my experience comes into the archive outside of the work itself. Um, I think it's really important what Matthias and Ajane are doing with this exhibit, and with their work more broadly about having a lot of behind the scenes footage. We send each other voice notes that I keep. We have recordings of meetings, and we act real silly on those calls, and we do that specifically so that when the record is shown, that folks know it's not always about business, right? That we are humorous, that we are witty, that we are loving, that we are concerned, that we write all of these other things that make us really dynamic. And so the ways that I've archived my own work have really just kind of been natural progressions or outgrowths of things that I already do. So ways to record meetings. I have there's a an artist that I am obsessed with right now. She's a scholar artist. Her name is Christina Sharp, and she has a work called Ordinary Notes. It's about 260 plus notes on her experience with the Lynch Museum, Lynch Memorial in Alabama, but then also more generally about her life with her mother, and the loss of relatives, etc. But they are as short as a couple of lines and as long as what one would consider a journal entry. And it's kind of a recording of her um, sentiment, memory, experience, etc., over a period of time. And so I'm thinking about there's a project that I'm working on really briefly of uncovering the story of an uncle who was discovered lynched or hanging, excuse me. And the record is very scant. And I'm having a lot of difficulty finding the record. And so the work itself is going to be of uncovering the record behind the event, but I'm also cataloging the difficulty that I experienced. The web pages, web links that I've gone to that are broken, the vital statistic records that I'm supposed to be able to access that no longer exist, right? And how I'm feeling about that frustration that I'm right. So I'm writing. Um, I'm trying to include my own emotionality and my own lived experience into the work that I'm also doing. So it's very new for me, but it's kind of here are the ways that recording and archive is already happening. How do I do it a little more formally, right? How do I put it together a little more comprehensively? What I'm going to do with it, I don't know, but that record will exist.
Why? Let me rephrase. What do you think? You're kind of taking on very large projects and things like that, especially in relation to like genealogy. Like, what do you think for a poet today who maybe hasn't thought about this process? What do you think they need to be considering in terms of archival?
Yeah, where are you? And my question very specifically has to do with place, right? What's the city that you're in? What's the neighborhood that you're in? What's the township that you're in? What's the municipality or the urban landscape that you're in? And what's the history of that place? Who came before you? Who who named the town? Who was the town named after? Who was the first Black XYZ? Is there even a first Black XYZ, right? I think dropping your bucket where you are, and I hate that euphemism because of what it is attached to, but it's probably the most illustrative that I can give right now of like, here's where I am, here's the city that I'm in, how can I know this place more deeply and more intimately? And I think that will make your work richer, right? It'll give you even more grift that you can use. It doesn't, right? Your work doesn't have to be about your own family history, or you can write about cats, right? But if you live in a city, right, where the landscape is changing, you may have more feral cats. Observe them, right? A lot more closely. Closely. I started bird watching. It's my favorite thing to do, right? But there are things that are attached to that, right? Of being more observant of my surrounding that make me a better artist. And so I think really digging deep about even just where you are. You don't even have to go into your family history. I know people have a lot of trauma that's buried there. And for some folks, that's a very difficult thing to do. But like where you actually literally live, work, sleep, worship, right? Find out more about that place and see how that shows up in the work that you do.
Yeah, that's big and important. I think one of the things that I learned, especially as it concerns my own work, but really in like being able to communicate, especially to like the youth. Like for so we did I've done a couple. I did this program with Ames where we would go in and we were like teaching artists like with Ames, and I think one of the really cool things was kind of like because they have this less experience than you, then the resolution for a lot of the things that they want to write about is just like it's not as deep as like your resolution might be, or it
Mhm.
might not be as complex as your resolution is. And I'm like, that is just a subsequence of like time, right?
Sure.
So that's just because there's a time difference between the two of us. I've been able to observe. I've been able to observe more, but then just encouraging them to be like, well, don't let time be like the only factor. Like, let also be like diligence. So it's like, even if you like, somebody could be, 15 years old, but if they got committed and they got locked in, they could know more about the the cats in your city than, like, a lot of people, right? You could become like an expert in those fields. And like Jeff talks about that a lot as well. It's like, like being like an expert at whatever you do, or being having that kind of level of commitment, because there is I think there's a serious lacking, especially for I think a lot of artists, when it comes to the perspective of what they want from their artistic career, and the effort that they put into it, right? So like, even when we talk about like maybe like the mechanics of YouTube, right? Like, if you're like, oh well, I want to have like a really large YouTube channel, but you're like, I don't know the first thing about, like, the best times to post. I don't know the best thing about formatting my videos or anything like that. It's like, well, you have not done the real research into really getting to your goal. And you should probably, I was thinking, like, there's a concept in film, when we're just talking about like the iceberg, and we're talking about like, this is how much it looks like you, like, this is how much information that you share, but the iceberg is goes miles below the surface, and that's how much information you should know miles more than what you're necessarily having to share at the time. And there's so many poets that their poem is, because they learned a word yesterday, now they have an entire poem about the word, and it's only just about like the spelling of the word or something like that. But I'm like, somebody else that's like, that word is interesting. Where did that word come from? Who was the person that, like, genesis the word? Who was the person that made the word popular in their time? Like, you know what I mean? There's connections that you can make that are beyond just kind of the surface level, that will, just like, the work that you're doing, make your work richer and make your work more appealing to the observer.
I think, just for the interest of time, because we've already had Tyiesha for an hour and a half, and
It's been a rich
it's getting very
conversation.
late.
Man.
Shout out to linear time. Yeah. Some people would say it's cyclical. I'm not one of those people. I think it's linear, but people disagree.
Really
That's just
interesting.
my
That's
that's my hunch.
Hmm.
But
Have you said this before?
all the time,
This-
I walk into my niece's daycare when she was a kid. I would go to the people at the daycare, like, hey, time is linear, so and then
Oh,
I'll
just
leave.
recently, on a
I'll
soft
take their
Tuesday,
snacks and I'll leave.
you on a soft Tuesday, you would just
Just,
say
I
the
mean, if I'm like, oh, like, I'm picking her up from daycare. Oh, y'all having a good day? Hey, time is linear. And then I walk into McDonald's. I don't even order anything. I'm just like, hey guys, time is linear.
This is the exact opposite of what I wanted to happen a minute ago. When I
A minute
said,
ago, right? You don't get this minute again because time is.
That's why I know you lying, because you don't go to McDonald's, you go to Arby's. See,
it's that Chamoka or whatever that thing is.
The Jamaica shake is amazing. Okay, I
I've
don't
never
even.
had it. It's
Oh, yeah, that's what we're
watch
supposed to
it.
do. Yeah.
Tyiesha, are there final thoughts that you would like to share? Things that maybe we didn't quite have time for that we want to make sure we leave people with?
yeah, I'm not really good at final thoughts. I'll have really good ones like tomorrow. Um, but I
So we
will
have to do
say,
this again, huh?
yeah, we'll have to come back tomorrow. But I will just say, if there's anybody who is curious about um, how to incorporate poetry um, into archives, that um, there's really great work that's like examples of how it can be done. And so I just want to shout out Black women writers who precede me, who have done that work. Honore Fanon Jeffers has a really beautiful work on the age of Phyllis, talking about Phyllis Wheatley Peters. Um, and Zora Neale Hurston of Moses and Men, right? So there are examples of the way that this work can be done, and can be done um, professionally, and to the level of excellence that we think it should be, and gives us permission, right, to do the work we were already going to do anyway. It just shows us another way to do it.
Cool.
But where can the people find you if they want to keep up with your work and with what you have coming up next?
Yeah, that should have been my final thought.
It
So I'm
is.
on Instagram at wr.i.te. It's supposed to be a really clever way of writing I write. I'm also a member of the Giovanni Collective, spelled traditionally, and we are also on Instagram. And so you can find a lot of public performances, open mics, and workshops there. And I'm going to be included in a handbook really, really soon about arts based research and how I marry history with art. And so that'll be published in 2026. I have a chapter that's going to be in there, so I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Clap it up. And she's also again in the exhibit that will be up until August 3rd of this year. If you want to make sure that you catch the exhibit before it's up, and if you're in the Columbus area, if you're in the Ohio area, if you're in the Midwest, okay, if you're in the continental U.S. and you're like, man, I just really want to experience something transcendent. Just go ahead and take an Uber from wherever you are. So if you're in San Diego right now and you're like, just book the Uber, get to Columbus. By the time you get here, it'll be daytime. You can go ahead and watch. But yeah, come here and absolutely take a look at the Legend of John Henry. I feel like it's transformative, and I think that you're gonna really enjoy it. And Tyiesha's also in a documentary that is for sure gonna be airing on Friday. Absolutely, 100% gonna
For
be airing
sure.
on Friday
For sure.
at the Urban Art Space. Where again, if you come to see the documentary, you'll also be in the same exact space as the exhibit. So make sure you catch both of those. She is a great conversationalist. She knows a lot, and if you're an artist that needs to learn and understands their need for learning, like she's absolutely somebody that you should follow and keep up with. Shout out to the Giovanni Collective as well. Keep up with them, and ultimately, thank you so. Y'all don't even understand. So like, I told Tyiesha about this like earlier today. Like I was just like,
Today.
Tyiesha, later on today, can you just talk with me and then everybody on YouTube
Yeah.
for a couple hours? And
For
she
90
did.
minutes.
She was like, what?
Oh,
Yes.
that's like how you found out you're doing a documentary this morning.
Right. This is
Don't
the
play.
eve of my anniversary. So I'm letting you know right now, like they're
Wait, what
very.
was that?
This is tomorrow's my anniversary, my wedding anniversary.
Oh yeah.
Hey, congratulations.
My husband and I share space with each other, and you are absolutely um, pushing it right now. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, I wanted to share space with you. Like I said, I've seen what you all are doing together, and many of the questions that you're asking about the business, right, of art and like how we quantify certain things. We can qualify things all day. We are, you know what I'm saying, arts and letters. But there are ways that we need to quantify the work that we do. That's the archive. That's pay scale. That's the amount of time that we're dedicating, etc. And you guys are bringing that question up in a space that I don't know everybody is. So I'm honored to be here with the two of you today, for sure.
Thank you,
Much love.
Tyiesha.
Thank
We
you so
appreciate
much.
you.
Of course.
Cool. All right.
All
We'll
right.
let you go. We'll
Yeah,
see,
have a good
Tyiesha. You
night.
be
Tell
good. You have a
tell
good night.
Marshall I said another year down, man. Good for
I'm
you,
not
brother.
delivering. Not delivering. All right. Good night.
Hey, we'll see. We'll see.
Good night.
Well,
That was nice.
that was
It was
nice.
pleasant.
All right. I'm going to send us off into that good night. 'Cause
That's grim.
send us off to that.
To just a good night. It's gonna be a good
Send
night.
us to, yeah,
If you
that's
say
not-
that good night, that's like
Is it bad?
yeah,
I thought
that is all right.
if someone told me that, I would be like, "Oh, that was warm."
If somebody tells you that, if they're like Jeff, I'm sending you on into that good night, like they mean harm. They mean you harm.
You don't have to be like, "Yeah, so that's like, I mean, yeah, that's not good. Like, you can say it soft, like, I'm gonna
Yes.
send you off into that good night. That's friendlier, right? No.
What are we doing later on this week, Jeff?
I'm traveling. I'll be honest. So actually, a note. So a lot of our shows and things like that. I'm traveling abroad, so I'll be out of town for a couple weeks. We'll be back. We're here through Thursday, so everything through Thursday is still up and going. Um, then after that, our open mic this week, unfortunately, we're taking a little break because I'll be away. So on the 2nd and on the 9th, we'll be gone. But then after that, Monday, what day is Monday? The 5th, right around August 5th, we're back at our regular programming.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
or not our 5th, 12th, sorry, 12th.
12th. Yeah, and then again, so we're not gonna have the open mic this coming up Friday, but we will have the closing ceremony. So if you're gonna be like, I'm going to Diverses, like you just see half of the people that are on the podcast right now at the show on Friday, so you should be there. Then yeah, where can they follow us? Can they follow us?
Yep, you can find us right. It's a little blocked off, but yeah.
It feels like
you can find us. I think we're in the lag spike. Give it a second.
Oh,
there we go. We're back. Okay, yeah. If you want to find us, keep up to date, you can go to at the Versus Poetry. You can see us that little note right there. You can also go to versuspoetry.com, sign up for our event calendar. We keep you informed of everything we're doing. With that, I'm going to send us off. Not into that good night, because I would hate to offend people. I'm just going to send you off. That's it. Once more, my name is Jeff.
I'm Matthias.
Thanks to Tyiesha for joining us. We'll see everyone later. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon.